Hello and welcome to the Ruth MacFit Podcast. I am very happy to be here with you as always. I've got my cup of tea, I'm standing at my desk, I'm keeping moving. I even wore a mic that I can move around with because I think that's going to work better. Anyway, but I'm here today to chat to you about something that I see coming up a lot, something that isn't only coming up in check-ins, it's coming up probably because I'm seeing the results from the Midlife Habit Scorecard as well. It's something I've mentioned in a previous episode, but I feel like it deserved a whole episode of its own because it's such a big area and it's making so many of you feel quite frustrated. We can so easily get into comparison. We can feel stuck or frustrated because it feels easier for someone else, and I really do get it. We are human. And comparison is part of how we make sense of the world. But what if I told you that instead of letting it hold you back, we can actually use this to our advantage? I also want to mention to you the book I'm reading at the moment. It's Let Them by Mel Robbins. I know I've talked about this before. She's also been all over the place because in her podcast, she's been spreading that message of how much better we can age when she was talking to the orthopedic surgeon. And if you haven't listened to that, I highly recommend you do. But anyway, I digress. In the book, Let Them, it's really resonating with me. I'm going to be honest, it's not like groundbreaking science in there. It's likely things that you've heard before. But what I really like about it is that she puts these things so simply. She's clearly writing it as a mum, as someone that struggled with this herself, and that makes it very relatable. And I think sometimes that is the case when we're reading books. You know, if we're reading them and they're written by a psychologist or people that are experts in that specific field, it isn't so relatable. This is what I was saying to my husband the other day. We were chatting about something that he was thinking he could do. And he was like, oh, but the thing is, I don't have enough experience in that. I was like, you do though. You have enough experience because you're not looking to help those people who are already experts. You're looking to help people who are slightly behind where you currently are. And that's what I feel like Mel Robbins is doing in the book. And some of the things that she says about how we're wasting our energy on worrying about what others are doing and then feeling annoyed or making assumptions about their journey, someone else's journey, is so interesting. Really, what she says is we just need to let them do what they're doing, let them succeed, let them take up their space, let them make different choices, whatever choices they want to make, because none of that changes what we are capable of. Now, I don't want you to feel bad about comparison because it is something we all do and it is wired into us. There is actually a term for this. It's called social comparison theory. And it explains how we naturally evaluate ourselves based on what others are doing. Seeing someone else succeed can sometimes be really helpful. It can inspire us, but unfortunately, it does often lead to self-doubt, frustration, and feeling like we are falling behind. I see this with my children. I've got one who's like, my brother's doing that, I'm going to give it a go. It's not necessarily a competitive thing, but he gives it a go, he goes all in. And the other would be like, my brother's doing that, so I don't want to do it anymore. Anyway, if you've got children or siblings, you may well be able to relate to that. I think you can just see it a little bit more in play, the different ways people react to other people's success and enthusiasm. And studies have found that frequent social comparison is linked to higher anxiety, depression, and body dissatisfaction, which I'm sure a lot of you can relate to. And the other thing that it showed, in brain imaging studies, they showed that comparison actually activates the same area of the brain as physical pain. How weird is that? So when you're feeling that little stab of, oh, why is she so much further ahead than me? Why is it not working for me? It's because your brain is literally processing it as a threat, which is interesting. And I know from experience, I'd love to say I didn't know from experience, but I do. And I'm sure lots of you can relate, that comparison tends to hit harder when our hormones are all over the place. When estrogen and progesterone fluctuate, we become more sensitive to perceived social threats. And then if you add that on top of poor sleep, thank you perimenopause to those of you that are going through that, and suddenly that harmless Instagram scroll can leave you feeling like you're failing at life, which obviously we don't want. And I'm sure that's probably where the term doom scrolling comes from. And it could be that you're feeling really good about how things are going, feeling great about your workouts, the progress you've made with your fat loss. And then you saw that someone else had lost weight quicker than you. They were lifting heavier than you. They seemed to be coping better in a different workout than you. And you felt like you were falling behind, even though you had felt like you were doing really well. And that can be a really tough mindset to shake. There's this belief that if someone else is winning, then we must be losing. And that is not how it works. Success isn't a finite resource. If your friend is getting fitter, it doesn't take away your progress. And if you're seeing someone else do well and it stings, that doesn't mean you're failing. It just means something about their success matters to you. And that is worth paying attention to. On a side though, I think you see this in other areas as well. It's not just like fat loss and comparison. I think you see it in business. And I was chatting about this recently with regards to coaching and how I've heard in the past, people that are worried about supporting other coaches because they feel like they're in competition with them. I'm sure it's the same in many businesses. But if we've got the same objective and we are different people, we're going to relate to different people and so on. If we want to make as many people feel great in midlife as possible, then we're going to find our job easier if we all kind of collaborate together and have this amazing community. We're going to be able to help each other spread that message. We're going to be able to learn from each other, and that's why I loved it when Claire from Fit Positive reached out to me. It's women supporting women, and that's how it should be, 100%. So as I was saying, before I digressed a little, instead of feeling paralyzed by this comparison, you can ask yourself, can this actually be a good thing? What if instead of seeing it as proof that you're behind, you saw it as a sign that something is really important to you? Maybe the reason it stings is because deep down you know that you really want this for yourself. And that's really, really a powerful realization, because now, instead of feeling stuck, you can use it as a motivation to take action. I know that a lot of you might be thinking what I'm about to go on to next, because I've been there before as well, right? You might be catching yourself as you're listening to this thinking, well, all right, Ruth, but the people I'm comparing myself to, it is easier for them. They've got more time, and it's not fair because they get to eat more calories and I'm a smaller person, I'm shorter, and so on. And like I said, I definitely used to do this. I'd think, well, it's easier for them because they haven't had rheumatic fever, they don't have the joint pain I have. It's easier for them because they don't have 2 children, they're not working or whatever. And sometimes, and this is something I want you to remember, it's something that Mel Robbins says as well, sometimes it is unfair. Sometimes people are dealt a slightly different hand. If you're smaller in height and stature, your calorie needs are going to be lower. And yeah, that's annoying and it's not fair, because when you go to eat in restaurants, the calories are often like most of your daily allowance. If someone is taller, they're naturally going to be using more energy. Anyway, it's just how it is. But the thing is, focusing on what's unfair doesn't change anything. Sometimes life is unfair and we have to move on past that, accept it. And one of the things I love about the way Mel Robbins puts this is that she'll just say, let them eat more, let them have more time, let them be ahead of you in their journey, because it doesn't change anything about your ability to make progress. And the sooner you shift your focus to what you can control, the better results you're going to get. And I say that to my clients all the time, like focus on what you can do, focus on your daily actions, focus on starting where you are, accept where you're starting. You might not be starting in the same place as someone else, but the one thing that will guarantee you don't get results is not starting at all because of that. We measure our progress. This is something I've said again. We measure against our progress, not against our ideal, where we wish we were. So here's something I want you to think about. So with this all in mind, what if comparison isn't a bad thing? What if it's actually a signpost to what really matters most to you? Let's say you see someone who's lifting heavier than you and you feel like a bit annoyed, a pang of envy. And instead of beating yourself up, you ask yourself, is this actually something I want? Because if the answer is yes, then that comparison has just shown up as an area of your life that you can do something about. And that is really positive. It might be that you're like, why am I bothered about this? And you actually find it's not something you want to do. It's just that you're feeling like you have something you want to focus on. And I have seen this recently, actually, with a client who came to me. She had a fat loss goal. She's a classic yo-yo dieter. She'd get distracted by other things going on around her. And a friend of hers at a similar time had started a weight loss injection and was making faster progress with her fat loss journey. There was part of my client who was like, oh, I'm a bit envious because she's making faster progress. But she was able to stop and go, but I don't want to do it that way. You know, this is no judgment on those of you that have decided to go down that route, but I think you need to go into it with your eyes wide open and go, she was saying, I don't want to do it that way because when I go out for dinner with my friend, just occasionally, she's not able to eat the food she likes because she just can't do that. She's struggling with exercise and strength training, which are important as we age, for sure, 100%. And the client of mine is wanting to do this in a way that means that she feels fitter, stronger, healthier for longer. She wants to be able to achieve her fat loss, maintain it, and age well. Now, I'm not saying her friend isn't going to age well, but the things that you do want to focus on are not just getting thinner. And so my client was able to look at what her friend was doing, feel a pang of envy, and then realize, actually, I'm aware of that. I do want to achieve fat loss, so I am a little bit envious there, but I know I want to do it a different way. But she was conflicted, and it was good to have that back and forth for a moment. So I want you to have a think about the fact that comparison isn't necessarily a bad thing, and it can be a signpost as to what really matters for you. One thing I also want you to remember, that when you feel that envy, that jealousy, that comparison, you're not in conflict with that person. That feeling is an inner conflict. You're in conflict with yourself. Does that make sense? So how are we going to make that feeling change? How are we going to change this? How are we going to shift away from comparing ourselves to others and instead focus on comparing ourselves to us? I know that one thing that I did when I was starting Ruth MacFit, and I found myself getting distracted by the messages that so many other people were putting out, and they might not have had the same goal or objective as me as coaches, but if I was finding myself getting like, oh, maybe I should be putting out things like that, or doing my reels this way, or doing that this way, I was being less and less like me when I was doing that. So I muted those accounts if they were people that I knew, or if they were making me feel like really like, I'd unfollow them. And if you're finding yourself comparing constantly, particularly if you have a fat loss goal, it could be that you're looking at bodies of people that you don't know the life they live. Anyway, mute them or unfollow them, because if it's not inspiring you or empowering you, then remember it's not serving you. It's just feeding that negative. So stop, get rid of them, goodbye. Compare yourself only to your past self, not someone else. Now, I want to be very clear on what I mean by this, by what I say of your past self. When I talk about your past self, I mean you that started this part of your journey, not you from years ago that had a different life, was able to do different things. Because it isn't helpful to look at that past you from years ago and be like, why am I not like that now? How did I let myself go? Because I don't think that's healthy either. And it's something I used to do, you know, why am I not the same as I was in my 20s? Ruth, who'd have thunk? Why do you think you're not the same? Because in my 20s, I had no children. I hadn't had children, so my body shape was different. And I could live quite selfishly. And I was eating more, but I was probably more active too. There. I can't say I was healthier though. I definitely feel that if I am going to comparing to an older version of me, I'm much happier in my 40s as a person. I feel much more in line of knowing who I am. That sounds a bit wishy-washy, but I feel so much more sure of myself now. But if I'm comparing body-wise, yeah, it's changed. But I could crush her, so I'm just saying that. I could crush her. But turn the jealousy into curiosity. Instead of, why do they have that? Ask yourself, what can I learn from them? These are people that are paving the way for your success. Look at what they're doing and see if there's anything that you can learn from them. And then take action. Focus on what you can do. Instead of sitting in frustration, ask yourself, what is one small thing I can do today that will move me closer to my goal? And Claire, this is Claire for Claire_ESG Fitness, not Claire Fit Positive, i.e. One thing I really liked that she mentioned ages ago when I was chatting to her is that if she's feeling like her day has not gone very well and that she's not really had much success in the day, then she'll ask herself, maybe it's on the way home from work, maybe it's in the evening, after dinner, wherever, but later on in the day, she'll say, okay, what's one thing that I can do today that means that I've taken some action towards my goal, that means that I've won something? And there's normally something. It could be that it's going to bed a little bit earlier, getting something ready for tomorrow. But if you're noticing days like that, then ask yourself that question, and I'll give you another win. If you stopped and asked yourself that question and reflected, then that is also a positive that you can take from your day. The main thing is to remember that the only person that you should be competing with is the you that started this journey, the you from yesterday. That's it. Keep in your lane, focus on what you're doing, and you will get to where you want to be. Don't try and rush it. And actually, on a little side note with that, this is something I'm seeing probably because we're coming up to summer or spring, is that a lot of people are wanting to change. They might have gained weight over Christmas. Maybe they started the New Year diet and then they've like given up in January and they've gained a bit more weight. And they're like, right, I'm annoyed. I'm going on holiday in the summer and I want to lose all of this weight by then. But they're not looking at how long a time that is. I know I mentioned on a podcast a while back, a client of mine who said that she wanted to lose a certain amount by May. And when she said the weight, it sounded okay. It sounded like, oh, okay, well, May's ages away. That seems realistic. But when we broke it down into weeks, and I was like, actually, that's like you achieving 1 to 2 pounds per week, which means that until May, which at the time was like 10 weeks away, I think, 10 weeks away, maybe 11 weeks away, that means you're in a constant deficit for that whole time. And we knew that she had little kind of breaks here and there. And it made her kind of go, oh, actually, I maybe want to set a more realistic expectation, even though to a lot of you, you know, you hear 1 to 2 pounds a week, that will sound very realistic and it can be, but it's also knowing that that's not realistic if you've got lots of other things on. You know, sometimes it's better to say to yourself, I'm actually going to just make it a commitment to stick to the path and make it about actions rather than picking a set weight by a set date. That really was a tangent. Sorry. But the reason I mention it is because that pressure can actually make you feel like you failed, and you're not failing. You just haven't met what was already an unrealistic expectation. So as we're coming to the end of this podcast about comparison, but with a few little tangents in there, as always, I want you to remember that comparison is normal. It's always going to be there. It is human nature, but it definitely doesn't need to control you. But asking yourself, is this actually about them or about me? And then knowing that more often than not, it's going to be about you. Well, that's useful to know. It's going to be that inner conflict with yourself, your values, your goals. And it doesn't need to make you feel bad. You can use it to fuel you, to move you forward. And if you find yourself thinking it's easier for them and so on, then take a deep breath and do what Mel Robbins says and let them. And then the next bit of advice from her is let me. Their path doesn't change yours. You're on your own journey, and that is all that matters. Their success can fuel you. We can all win. And let's be those women who are empowering each other and not competing against each other. I think I've said enough. It is a topic I could chat about because I really feel like we traditionally love community. We love being part of a community, women. And I want it to be a community that build each other up, not bring each other down. That is for sure. So I'm going to leave you on that thought. But if you've got any topics that you'd like me to cover, then let me know. I'm always interested to hear what you're thinking, any questions you have. And if this episode resonates with you, then of course, share it. Share it with those that you think need to hear it, and subscribe so that you don't miss out on the next episode. You can find me, as always, on Instagram at Ruth MacFit, my website, www.ruthmacfit.com. And you can join the waitlist to be first to know when coaching doors are open at Ruth MacFit. Thank you very much. I will look forward to speaking to you again next time. Goodbye.